Welcome to the 2024 Conference on Engaged Learning. I'm Jessie Moore, the director of Elon Center for Engaged Learning, and I'm delighted that you were able to join us. One important logistical note before we get started: if you have a V in your name tag and you haven't gotten one of these and you would like a vegetarian meal, please raise your hand in a couple minutes and let me know, and we will get one to you. These will ask you to put out to signal that you'd like the vegetarian option, which is a delicious California cauliflower steak. It sounded awesome, so you're in for a treat. But if you need one, just let me know as I'm wrapping up the introduction, and I will make sure you get one of these tents. So, okay, with that, Elon University's name draws on the Hebrew word for the oak tree, and our roots have a rich and complicated history. This area was first inhabited by Siouan-speaking Native American tribes, with the Occaneechi being the most dominant by 1650. I would like to acknowledge that we are on the land of the Ino, the Tutelo, the Saponi, the Occaneechi, and the Shakori Native people by reading a statement that's been adapted from their official Occaneechi land acknowledgement statement so that it can be read by a non-native or non-indigenous person. We are gathered today on land that was traditionally part of the territory of the Saponi people in the Piedmont of what is now the state of North Carolina. This area is not far from the great trading path used by both native people in the area and non-native peoples during the early years of contact. The Saponi people, whose descendants include the Occaneechi Band of Saponi Nation Indian tribe, still thrive and live in this region, officially recognized by the state government of North Carolina. The Occaneechi are connected to this land spiritually and physically. It provided all they needed to sustain their communities. They hunted in the forests, fished in the streams, and grew their crops in the woodland clearings. They picked the wild grapes, gathered the acorns, and harvested their poplar bark to build their homes. They are bonded and one with this land yesterday, today, and tomorrow. It flows within their veins. Despite how the landscape has changed, regardless of the concrete, asphalt, and steel that covers it today, it is still their home, and the bones of their ancestors sleep in this part of our Mother Earth. As we come together here, do not forget that the Occaneechi people love this land, although most of us who live and work on it today have little knowledge of their past and present existence. They did not sell or willingly vacate the land, so it remains in their hearts. This land does not belong to man, we belong to the land. The Occaneechi people, the Yisa, ask that you will keep these thoughts in mind while here in place and treat with the respect, love, and care that their ancestors did and that they do so today. There's a danger of land acknowledgements being performative. I hope, though, that centering this land's history and the injustices that occurred here will prompt us to apply a critical social justice lens to our conversations tonight and tomorrow as we share and discuss our engaged learning scholarship and practices. In light of ongoing political violence here in the U.S. and in other nations around the globe, I also hope we can heed the Occaneechi call for respect, love, and care, not only to the lands we inhabit and visit, but also to our fellow humans. Tomorrow we'll acknowledge additional Elon roots. For now, Makuri Mikin Kiho, you are welcome here. I am pleased to introduce other members of the conference planning team: Donna Camp, CJ Fleming, Judene Pretti, Gianna Smurro, and Annelise Weaver. I'll say more about 4 of these incredible women in just a moment, but first I want to acknowledge Donna Camp's tireless work behind the scenes, and she's peering in from the doorway. She's the person who is... She's the person who has collaborated with all our campus partners to ensure we have presentation spaces reserved, technology available, and delicious food. So please join me again in thanking her. So thank you, Donna. CJ, Judene, Gianna, and Annelise have led the Center's 2022-2024 research seminar on work-integrated learning, As I'll share more tomorrow, each summer CEL facilitates meetings for 3 multi-institutional research seminars, and we schedule our annual conference adjacent to the research seminar that's meeting for its 3rd and final year. In addition to supporting 5 research teams as they've pursued multi-institutional, multi-year, multidisciplinary, and in some cases international research, CJ, Judene, Gianna, and Annelise have looked for the through lines among our team's research. Tonight, they're sharing what they've learned about juggling perspectives, students, supervisors, and academic mentors in work-integrated learning. Please join me in welcoming our leadership and keynote team.
Okay, welcome everybody. Given that you registered for the conference, you probably saw this online, but the term WIL and work integrated learning is really new for a lot of us in the United States. So first, I just want to say, what are we doing here? Work integrated learning, and we'll define it more thoroughly later, but work integrated learning in the United States context often means internship, co-op, those kinds of experiences. So that's what we're talking about. So when we say work integrated learning, you'll also hear us refer to that as WIL, and that's what we're talking about. And Annelise will tell us all about that momentarily. So today we are going to introduce ourselves just a little bit. We'll give you a little bit of an overview of what WIL is and what our seminar has been focused on. We'll have an opportunity for a little bit of reflection about your experience with WIL and how that has gone for you. And then we will each offer perspectives on WIL from different angles. Our students will talk about the student perspective, I will talk about the academic mentor perspective, and Judene will talk about the supervisor and organization perspective, and just kind of big picture, what are the things that we know about those domains. And then we wouldn't let you leave without a little closing reflection. We would never do that. And then we'll have time for questions and discussion at the end. So as Jesse kindly mentioned, I am CJ Fleming. I am faculty in psychology here at Elon University. I got involved with WIL because I wanted internships to be more effective in my own department, and then that led to work at the college level, and then here I am now. And so six years later, I'm really deep into internship and WIL work, and I'm happy to be here.
Hello, everyone. I am Judene Pretti. I am at the University of Waterloo in Waterloo, Canada, and I have an administrative role there now related to our co-op and experiential education offering. My teams are responsible for data and project management and information technology. But what brought me to this seminar was I spent a number of years engaged in research in work integrated learning and understanding the perspectives of the various people and ways in which it's constructed. And so I had the great privilege of being part of this seminar and learning from and with my colleagues.
Hello, my name is Gianna Smurro, and I am a recent graduate of Elon University with a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism and Cinema and Television Arts. And in this very few weeks, I will be attending William & Mary Law School on an intellectual property law track. So I'm very excited about that. And so I've had the privilege of working with these very incredible 3 women on this CEL conference. And so now I'll pass it over to Annelise.
Hey everyone, I'm Annelise Weaver, and I, like Gianna, am a 2022-2025 CEL Scholar. I'm a student here at Elon University, rising senior, and I'm majoring in psychology with minors in Spanish and communications, and I've had the privilege of working with some of the most incredible people I've ever met over the past 3 years. So I'm sad that this is our last year together, but I'm really excited for the week ahead. And with that being said, I have the privilege of opening this up. Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and give everyone a brief overview of what work integrated learning is. So work integrated learning, or WIL, is an approach to education that allows students to obtain work experiences related to what they are learning in a classroom setting. Some examples of this are, like CJ mentioned at the beginning, internships, apprenticeships, service learning, practicums, co-ops, and field work. And then I'm now going to cover a little bit of what we've been doing over the past 3 years, what our Work Integrated Learning Seminar has been. So over the past 3 years, the cohort that I've had the privilege of working with, and I have facilitated multi-institutional research on the topic of Work Integrated Learning. This cohort has collaborated with each other over the past 3 years, being separated into 5 groups, where they have done their own specific research on how Work Integrated Learning fosters student learning, how students are able to integrate their Work Integrated Learning experience with other important learning experiences, and how to better improve access to high-quality Work Integrated Learning opportunities. Sorry, I did not put that back. And really quickly, I also just wanted to talk a little bit about what we've been doing over the past 3 years. So year one, teams get together to create their research projects that they will be focusing on over the next couple of years. Team two, we come back together to discuss with the cohort their results over the past year and then plan for more specific steps for the future of their research. And then year three, which is the year that we're currently in right now, everyone comes back again and shares their research results of year two. And then this upcoming week, we're going to go ahead and plan for more long-term continuations of their research and then also participate in this conference that's going on right now. And lastly, on this slide, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the 5 Will Cell teams. So when I say your team name, if you could just raise your hand so that everyone in here can see who I'm talking about. And I'm just going to talk about your inquiry questions and topics really quickly. So first, Team Dogwood. So Team Dogwood is focusing on the development of transformative leadership behaviors in student supervisors. More specifically, how does supervising students affect transformative leadership behaviors? Next, we have Team Holly. Team Holly is focusing on understanding faculty involvement in and support of will, more specifically motivations versus barriers for faculty. Next, we have Team Magnolia. And Team Magnolia is doing a literature review exploring the interrelationships between work integrated learning, belongingness, and health profession students. Then we have Team Oak. And Team Oak is focusing on an international exploration of students' conceptions of quality work integrated learning. More specifically, do students' conceptions of quality will differ between will programs? And then last but certainly not least, we have Team Maple. And they posed the question, what does work mean to first-generation students? And they have 3 a little bit more specific questions. So how do first-generation students understand work? How do first-generation students narrate their identities and will? And what role does their definition of work play in the negotiation of identities and will? And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Judene.
Okay, so we have both a warm-up reflection question and a wrap-up reflection question. So in our warm-up question, we want to ask you to think about, our title is Juggling Perspectives. So in will, we often think of 3 main players: the student learner, the external organization partner, and the academic institution, academic mentor, faculty member. So if you think of those 3 perspectives, they all have different things that they're bringing to the table, and that's what we're going to be talking about in our presentation today, is sort of why as a student, why as an academic mentor, why as an organization might you participate in work integrated learning. So I'm going to pause for a minute and let you think about and maybe talk about with the person beside you what has prevented or enabled you. Some of you may have been engaged in work integrated learning, some of you may not have. From your perspective, what has prevented or enabled you to participate in work integrated learning? Okay, so we're going to give you a couple of minutes to warm up, and then we'll collect you back here. Okay, I'm going to interrupt your conversations. I promise there will be more time later for additional conversation. But anyone want to shout out something that has enabled you or prevented you from being engaged with work integrated learning? We'll just take a couple. Rachel, you've got a smile. Just from your table. Just offer. It doesn't have to be yours. Yes. Yes.
We had interns come to our shop, and it was a very disorienting experience because they're sort of strange beasts.
Okay.
And we didn't have a formal plan until several years ago about how to even think about that.
Perfect.
And so the best advice I ever gave interns as they walked into our office was, be an advocate for yourself. People will let you participate in their work or give you assignments, but don't think that we've got a plan for you that's sort of pre-baked and off the shelf and ready to go for you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. You will hear that reflected in the research we share. Anyone else? A student perspective. And then I'll come to you. A student perspective. What has enabled you to participate in work integrated learning? Yes.
From the student perspective, I guess it's having a good relationship with the faculty, especially with the professors I've had. At least I've tried to make at least a little bit of a personal connection, so that we can talk more than just about the class and
Awesome. That's so good. So looking for more of a connection than just what the class might offer. And I think that echoes very closely to some of what came up in the workshop this afternoon with Michelle and Dave. And last one? Yes.
I'm with a team of people who are all healthcare providers who are now teaching at healthcare programs. We have a pro and a con that are battling each other. One of the things that enables will to happen in our programs is that our accreditation agencies demand it.
Right.
So if we don't have it, we get on probation or we get closed.
Right.
One of the things that prevents it is, this feels really stark, it feels very Darwin, right? But we have to have it. Having said that, all the programs have to have it. So unlike 40 years ago, lots more people need to be in these programs.
Right.
So there aren't as many spaces.
Right.
And lots of healthcare programs are now owned by a big conglomerate, and that conglomerate says, this is your production program.
Right.
Must produce to this level, and if you can't, then you can't have students. So those two are
That tension.
battling.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for those three perspectives. That's exactly what we have collectively learned in our research is about these tensions. The benefits mean that there's more people that want to do it, which means we need to find more places where there are quality experiences, which means we need to help prepare host organizations so that they're ready to take the students on. So that kind of gives you an overview of where we're going, and now we're going to dig in more deeply on each of the three perspectives. And over to Gianna for the students.
Okay, so very beginning with our first part, with our first stakeholder of the students. So we're going to start with the benefits. So it can kind of be broken into two different categories, the personal development and the professional development. So very first, we have time management skills. So students learn to prioritize tasks and manage their time to meet professional deadlines. And through managing various tasks and academic projects, it really helps to teach students how to effectively multitask and increase their adaptability to be able to shift between different tasks and responsibilities during a workday. You can also see increased confidence, and so by being placed in environments in which you can put you into practice to use what you've learned in the classroom and apply that to a real-world context. It can really increase the confidence of a student. So some students may experience something called imposter syndrome, making them feel as though they are not qualified despite preparation and all of their learning. And so will experiences allow a student to validate their abilities and gain confidence in the workforce. Next, we have networking opportunities. So professional relationships are able to be fostered through developing direct relationships with industry professionals, mentors, and colleagues. Such mentors provide guidance and support for student success, as well as be people that students can use as references in the future. Moving on to more professional development, students are able to gain hands-on experience in an industry. So students are able to participate in projects and work that has a real-world impact in an actual organization or company in the world. So theory is able to transition into practice while engaging in problem solving, gaining familiarity with things such as industry tools and software, as well as interacting with current industry practices. It also gives students an insight into potential careers. So will experiences allow students to experience post-graduation employment before they even graduate. And so they're able to assess how well they feel a particular position fits with their skill sets and future goals. It's very beneficial for students to find a place where they feel comfortable and that they can grow in the future, but it's equally beneficial for students to be put in placements that they feel might not be the best for them in the future, because it allows them to grow and shift their direction in order to find themselves in a place where they feel that they can thrive in the future. And then we also have professionalism. So students are able to demonstrate workplace behavior and gain experiences presenting and working in a professional environment while taking responsibility for different tasks during a workday and cultivating many other skills. And lastly, we have resume building. So such industry experiences really demonstrate to employers that a student has an understanding of a field and they can work in a professional context. So WIL experiences can also make a student's resume stand out by showcasing a proactive approach to their education and gaining that relevant work experience that they can take to future experiences. And now I'm going to pass it to Annelise to talk more about some risks in student perspective of WIL.
Okay, so Gianna just went ahead and spoke about some of the, here we go. Some of the benefits of WIL, and I'm going to talk about the risks. So first and foremost, limited support and guidance. For some students, depending on the work integrated learning experience they have been put into, support, guidance, and workplace education is not always at the top of a mentor's list for students. This is something that can have a negative impact on the student, as discomfort and confusion may arise if the student and work supervisor do not have that healthy mentoring relationship. This is not to say that students receiving limited guidance cannot succeed. However, most students need basic direction and mentoring to feel comfortable and confident in their work. Next, we have student limitations. So if a student is not well prepared for the WIL experience, this can lead to an unsuccessful experience. Limitations can include academic preparedness, lacking work-specific skills, and or resource limitations, such as the lack of financial resources to cover the cost of an unpaid WIL, access to transportation, limited availability to technology or proper equipment, and also time. Many students are juggling academic and personal responsibilities and don't have the time to commit to a WIL experience. Next, we have student safety. So physical and emotional harm are definite possible risks linked to failed WIL experiences for students. Student safety is unfortunately not always guaranteed, and effects of physical and emotional harm can be detrimental and can make for a very uncomfortable and unsafe WIL experience. Physical harm across organizations can vary, with something as simple as a dog bite to something more serious, such as a long-term injury or harm. And then as for emotional harm, this can be bullying and harassment. This kind of behavior in a work environment will negatively impact participants and make them feel at risk for harmful actions. Participants who are part of a cultural or gender minority are often targeted and discriminated against in this context. Mental health is also affected when it comes to harm and can have a serious negative influence on participants. This being said, through the research, suitable ways for emotional harm to be lessened were found that including a pre-placement system where students are matched with the host organization that follows disclosure processes with academic staff, as well as assessment of the suitability of host organizations. This is not to say that work conflict does not happen in these environments. Healthy disagreement can be beneficial. Respectfully disagreeing on topics should be welcomed and supported. However, if it gets to be consistent and communication turns to be non-existent, then this can have a big impact on students' overall success and can ultimately be a contributing factor in why students might not feel comfortable doing WIL experiences in the future. And last but not least, we have balance between learning and compensation. So the best WIL experiences typically have a commitment from the mentor that combines a learning commitment along with fair compensation. Unfortunately, some host organizations may use a student's WIL experience as their opportunity to take advantage of them by having them do tasks that are not relevant to the goals of WIL. This can be referred to as exploitative practices. So some employers might use WIL students as a source of cheap labor without providing those meaningful learning experiences. This exploitation can lead to students performing small tasks rather than gaining relevant skills. Then there's the difference between paid and unpaid, which can fluctuate the level of respect the student is perceiving. And on the flip side, it's not always just about respect, so motivation is also a big part of WIL, which this is not necessarily a bad thing. However, when we talk about compensation, this may shift the student's motivation and why they might want to do a work integrated learning experience. So you think of like intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So compensation can shift that focus from intrinsic motivation, so learning and the passion for the field, and to the extrinsic motivation, which would just be earning money, which could potentially affect the quality of engagement and learning in the student's experience. And I'm going to pass it back over to Gianna.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about some best practices on the student's part regarding will. And so the very first one is partnership, so acting as an active partner in your learning. So it's very important for students to take initiative and take that approach that they really want to make those connections with the people that they are working with, whether that be your academic mentor at your university or in a supervisor context. So taking that initiative, it really is a great thing. And so next we have effective communication, whether that be making sure you email people in a timely manner or just being professional in the work environment. It really does make the difference for students in their experiences. And so next we have active engagement, which kind of goes along with that, is making sure that you're invested in your internship and that you're putting in the appropriate amount of work so that you can get the most benefit as well as your supervisor. And so the very last thing that I have up there is feedback and reflection. So whether that be facilitated or non-facilitated. So I actually had the opportunity to partake in an internship while I studied abroad in Sorrento, Italy. I interned at a local publication in the area. And so a part of that, I was able to have facilitated reflection and non-facilitated reflection. So I was able to meet with my supervisor almost on a weekly basis to kind of go over how I was performing and how they were performing as well. I was also a part of a class of many different interns that were also interning in the area, where we were able to focus on the more soft skills that kind of go with interning at different places. And then I even also had meetings with an internship supervisor that was making sure that I was getting a quality experience and that it was a good environment for me to be working in. So having facilitated reflection was something that was really beneficial to my education, and it's something that students should kind of be looking to even do in a non-facilitated form so that they can reflect upon what you really want for your future career and where you would like to go into in the future. And so now I will hand it over to CJ to tackle more of the academic mentor perspective.
Thank you. We know the students are the stars of the show, so if anybody wants to leave, no, just kidding. So I am an academic mentor myself and have done a lot of work on faculty engagement with my pals, Team Holly, and also in my own work. So for me, thinking about the benefits from an academic mentor perspective, let me get my, there we go. Okay. From an academic mentor perspective, for me, it is very much personal in that this is an experience that I had as a student and that I want now my students to have as they prepare to go out into the field. And actually, the research literature backs that up. It's not just me that feels that way. A lot of people are doing this because that was a really formative experience for them, and they want to continue to offer that experience for other people as well. It also seems to vary quite a bit by discipline, in that if it's important to your discipline and it's kind of a norm in your discipline, then it's valuable to you and it's valuable to the student as well. Hopefully, it would also be beneficial for you as a mentor in terms of your own advancement and compensation. Here at Elon, I think we are generally well compensated for mentoring internships, and I also think that we are, you are at an engaged learning conference at Elon. This is who we are. This is what we do. So very much this is a part of what we do. That may not be true everywhere, but for us, certainly that's a major benefit for individual faculty. For me, another big benefit, and again, the research literature backs this up, is that this is an opportunity to work with students in a really unique and wonderful way. When I have 33 students in the classroom, I certainly do my best to get to know them, but to be able to work with them one-on-one and get to talk about their hopes and dreams and their career goals and how this has impacted them personally is just such a lovely experience, and it really offers a different opportunity for you as a faculty member. And then thinking a little bit more big picture, when I do admissions events, the absolute number one question that I get is, will my child get a job after having come to your university, and will that job pay their bills so that I am no longer paying their bills? This question is 100% of the time a dad Every time. Mom has other questions. Dad wants to know who's going to pay the bills in 4 years. Every time. And in fact, having a really strong internship program is a really great way to boost your reputation and to really be helpful in the admissions process. So whenever I'm answering Dad in the psychology department thing, I always talk about our internships and how that leads right into graduate school and professional career. So majorly helpful. The flip side is the risks for mentors, and everything that I just said can be a really great benefit. And everything that I just said, unfortunately, is a double-edged sword and can be just as much a risk in the opposite direction. The main way that is true, I think, is if you have inadequate compensation or if it's not really valued. A lot of people talk about how at their university they feel very underfunded, undersupported, that they're really in isolation, and so that can be as damaging as it can be wonderful to work with other people. We also know that if people are not appropriately compensated, that can be a major draw on resources and lead to a lot of faculty burnout. And the literature shows us that particularly women, junior faculty, and faculty of color are more likely to be in positions where it is uncompensated and undervalued. And if you stack those, all the more so. So really important to know that compensation and value can be a major boon, but it's important to think about that as a limitation as well. And then sending students out into the community draws risk for the university from a liability perspective. Absolutely, it can be a reputational risk, but there are also potential legal and financial consequences. And in that case, really just good liability insurance is the main way to go for that. But also making sure that you have really clear policies, both as sort of an individual mentor and as an institution, that you're sort of prepared for that and that you kind of have contingencies upon contingencies. So in terms of best practices for mentors, I'd like to start by talking about the value of collaboration. And that's really where Gianna started as well. And I think we talk about that with Judene as well. When we say juggling perspectives, we're really focused on everybody working to make this a great experience for students together. So how can we do that as mentors? In the roles that I have held at Elon, the absolute most sort of productive and amazing relationships I have been with our career center. And we have a fabulous career center. They're just amazing folks. But I know psychology and they know getting a job. And between us, we are a power team. And so really leveraging that relationship and working closely with them for me has made a tremendous difference. And then in terms of other partnerships, really working with the site supervisors. The best example that I can give you of this is our human services department. They have an internship program, and they have long, ongoing relationships with community partners where they are constantly nurturing that, reaching out to them, inviting them to campus, and it's a really lovely thing to behold. At the other end of the scale is students who maybe go to a town that you're not familiar with and work with a site that you don't know. And in that case, the least we can do is at least contact at the beginning and the end, maybe the beginning, middle, and the end. So some sort of relationship there, if not an ongoing one in some way. So as the academic mentor, the way that we can think about how to work with students is that is, for me, and I think in the literature as well, the entire goal. This isn't about really so much the experience for us as it is about making this experience so rich and so valuable for the student. And so how do we do that? And I have two frameworks that I'm pulling from. One is from our very own Jessie Moore and her recent book, Key Practices in Engaged Learning. Fostering engaged learning. Cannot recommend it enough. And this is not a paid endorsement. I was not pressured into this of my own free will. I'm telling you, it's a great book. Her model, and then also Pam Kaiser's model, which is, Pam Kaiser was a former faculty member in human services at Elon. And both of them point to some similar things. So I've kind of pulled key things that we as faculty can do to help facilitate student learning. The first is helping students to gather data from their experience. How do we get them to mindfully and intentionally sort of pay attention to what's happening in their internship and notice how that matters and what they're learning from that? So that's kind of step one. Step two is connecting that to the classroom learning, and that's really as a disciplinary mentor where I feel like I have the most to offer is helping them. It's the moment where they see the classroom come alive in the real world and how valuable that is. I love being a part of that moment when they come back and say, I saw this was a bold word in the textbook, and now I know what it looks like in the world, how wonderful that moment is. Working with others to get feedback and process that feedback. Internships absolutely have a strong interpersonal component, and we're learning how to function in the workplace, so that's huge. And then reflecting on and integrating experiences. We're big on reflection here at Elon and in the Center for Engaged Learning in particular, and helping students to take what they have learned and to make those connections and to integrate that into their self-concept, and also to integrate across disciplines, across courses, and across their own experiences. So that's what we're trying to do. Our way of communicating with students and really kind of setting up these expectations is through the syllabus. And I think it's really important that your syllabus for this includes information for both the student and the mentor and what they can expect from you and what is expected of them as well. So setting up a clear syllabus right at the outset, I think, is the key to starting out with success. And probably sharing that syllabus with the site supervisor as well, so that we're really all on the same page about what we're doing here. It's important to think about your course objectives and your assignments. And I have to admit that even me, I would say maybe at Elon I'm the most excited about internships. I'm up there. Maybe not the top, but close. My classroom class syllabus is probably 10 pages long. And my internship syllabus is like 2 pages long. And I'm not proud to admit it. It has the essential components, right? But doing what I do, I know sort of what the kind of key things are. But I think that generally speaking, faculty kind of treat these experiences differently and attend to them differently in terms of their assignments and objectives. And we should not be doing that, me included. So what are the things that we need to have on there? So course objectives, and what does that look like in terms of internship? It's really different for me than the classroom because part of it is personal growth and reflection, which I think is often happening in the classroom, but we don't always, I think, sort of pull that out in the way that we do in engaged learning. Ties to the academic content and also professional development. And I think a lot of times faculty mentors are not as comfortable with the professional development piece, and that's why I encourage you to make friends with your career services folks if you're not as comfortable. And I think it's important that your assignments are aligned with that. So for example, if you're focused on personal growth and reflection for your student, having weekly journal articles to help them kind of pull data from their internship and think about what that means to them and how that's helping them to grow. Ties to academic content, you might have an objective, whatever your disciplinary objective might be. For my students, I teach mental health, and so seeing specific mental health disorders and treatments is really often what we're going for. And so having them kind of tie that back with a research paper about a specific topic. And then professional development, a great example of this that our Career Center uses is an informational interview with somebody who's doing a job that you would one day hope to do, and interviewing them and also reflecting on that as you go forward. So really kind of pointing out to them that we've kind of got 3 buckets here of things that we're looking at, and here's how your assignments tie to that. And if you would like to think more about that, come back next month to our Teaching and Learning Conference, where I will be talking about that for an hour instead. So feel free to make a return visit to Elon. And then finally, just thinking about inclusion and equity in terms of student opportunities and how we can facilitate that as mentors. It's so challenging with internships because let's say that you do an internship over the summer. Here at Elon, you have to pay for that credit to the tune of $800-ish. And perhaps you have to move to a new city, or maybe you can live at home. And then oftentimes, especially in my field, it's unpaid. So not only are you not making money, you're going in the hole to go on this experience. And I think we think about that, but we don't. There's nothing we can do, really, right? That's just kind of the way of the world at this moment. In my department, we have started an internship scholarship program. At Elon, we have some funding through our Career Center that we can support students. So there are some opportunities for that, but I think being really mindful of that is important. In terms of preparing students, some of our students will have had jobs before but may not be familiar with networking. Some of our students may have never worked before, and so I think a big part of our job as a faculty mentor is helping every student feel ready to go in the workplace and really be prepared for what those expectations are going to be. And then last, so important to consider student identity. And again, I'm going to tell on myself with an example of something I was not impressed with that I did and what I would do now differently. And that is, I worked with a student. She was working at one of North Carolina's 3 state mental hospitals. And it's in a rural part of North Carolina. And the student is Asian American. And we did not talk about her identity or anything about that. She just went and did the internship. And I now know from other random connections that people in that county are so unused to that particular ethnic group that a group of people I know, high school students, were followed around the grocery store. They were Asian, and people followed them around and watched them because they were foreigners to them, which is a horrible experience. And B, that student was doing an internship in that county for 8 weeks, and we did not talk about safety issues and that kind of thing. And in the moment, this was probably 10 years ago, it didn't occur to me. And I hate that that didn't occur to me, and that will never happen again, because now I have a whole set of procedures and processes and conversations that we have. And so I really like to talk about that, because I think we don't often think about the way that, like, our campuses are typically a bubble, and we are sending students out of that bubble. And we owe them a responsibility to check in about that and make sure that they are safe, and to be really thoughtful and mindful about that. So never again. And the way that the literature talks about this is really you as an advocate for your student, both you advocating for them and helping them to be an advocate for themselves. I know a lot of times I work with students in internship who have, for example, disability accommodations, and how do we facilitate them having a space to talk about that with us, a space to talk about that with their employer, advocating for themselves, and also, again, helping to advocate for them. And then lastly, I'll just share, we have been using the language best practice because that's what we do. It's who we are. It's kind of the main term. But the research literature in this area actually advocates for what they call WISE practice, meaning that we start with the best practices, but with the understanding that every student is different with different needs and a different identity. And so we really need to be massaging our requirements and our expectations and our preparation to make sure that every student feels like they have a safe place. Awesome. And with that, I'll pass to Judene.
Thanks, CJ. I like that WISE practice idea. So I'm going to share a little bit about the supervisor or organization, external group, whatever label makes sense. And in doing so, I want to sort of draw the contrast. We've talked about the various types of work integrated learning, everything from internships and co-op, practicums, field placements, all of those types of will mapped onto all of the types of organizations that students might find themselves in, whether those are large multinational corporations, whether they're small startups or social impact organizations, not-for-profits, government offices. So there's a wide range of organizations where students are going to find themselves, as well as a wide type of will. And so those complications are really going to lead to very different expectations for what you have your industry or community supervisors doing. There is a lot of research. I'll put a small caveat on this. There's a lot of research for placement-based work integrated learning. So that means the student is connected with and part of the organization. So there's a lot of research around why organizations do that and the benefits that they stand to get from doing that. There's much less in the literature around more project-based will. So if students are in classes and doing consulting projects or research projects for an organization, there's less research on the receiving end of that from an organizational perspective. But I decided to group this into two parts. So one is the frequently cited ones, the ones those of us who've been doing this research for a while can probably sort of recall the key studies. Short-term labor, a flexible source of labor. So if there's peaks and valleys in an organization's workload, you can bring in a student at a particular time of year who can help offset that. So those are sort of short-term benefits. Longer-term benefits have to do more with possible planning, so which students you take as interns that you might want to convert to full-time employees after they graduate, or how do you want to build your organization or company's brand with the next generation of employees that are coming out. Also, when I think about healthcare, education, where there is mandatory work integrated learning, often that's about giving back. So if I'm advanced in my career, then part of the reason I participate as a supervisor on this site is because I want to help develop the skill in the next generation that's coming into my profession. The one thing I wanted to highlight here, though, is there's some less cited benefits that are also in the literature. And one has to do with sort of the impact of the student on the organization. And there are studies that show the dynamic of teams changes as a result of the student being in the workplace. Now, I think it's interesting to overlay, and I'll get in a minute, the idea of remote working, but I think that's an interesting component to add into this as far as how much the dynamic changes if the student isn't physically located within the team, because I think the types of responses that employers give in this research has to do with the ideas the students are contributing, the energy and the enthusiasm that they're bringing, and how that sort of changes the dynamic of team members who may have been around for a while. The other benefit that I wanted to flag, and Dogwood, shout out to Team Dogwood, is doing research in this area, and that is about the site supervisor's own personal development and professional development. So, sometimes taking on a student may be the first supervisory experience that person has had. And so how does Will help develop the leadership capabilities? And so, yeah, check out the poster and the presentation tomorrow from Dogwood on that. So we talked about benefits, also challenges and risks. So this has come up already in several different ways, but meaningful and authentic work. There's a study that was done in Canada that asked supervisors or organizations who didn't hire work-integrated learning students why they didn't, and the number one reason was they didn't feel they had suitable or meaningful work. And so I think that is a call to action from a higher education perspective, because how do we help bridge that divide? Because chances are there is work that would be suitable. It's how do we figure out who the right students are and how to help the organizations sort of scope or identify the kinds of work and projects that students will be successful in. So I think that is, we can tackle that one. Tied to that, mentorship and supervision. So all of us who have worked with students, no matter what that capacity might look like, know that to do a good job, you need to invest time. And they may not be in the organization for a long period of time. So it's about how do you create the time to provide that supervision and mentorship such that the students are successful. I'm going to flag in-person and remote. This is still very much an emerging area of research that's happening in work-integrated learning. The early indications, both from a student perspective and an organizational perspective, is that there is a difference in the outcomes that are achieved if it's a purely remote experience. That I don't think should come as a surprise to too many people. On the other hand, like us, students appreciate the flexibility of having some ability to work remotely. And so I think it's going to be interesting over time to see how we find the right balance of that. I think all of us can imagine that there is learning that's lost by not being physically located and seeing things that are happening, interactions between colleagues. The types of learning that happens for work-integrated learning students is going to be different if they're not physically located with teams. But I think that's something that we're going to have more and more research come out and show us how we can counter or take advantage of the benefits of one and not lose out on the other. And then paid versus paid has come up by both other perspectives. Clearly, there are some norms with respect to paid or unpaid will, whether it's specific industries or specific academic programs. I'm flagging it here only from the perspective of the research suggests that it changes the nature of the relationship. And that's not going to surprise, I don't think, anyone here. If I'm an employer and I'm paying a student for something, I'm going to be expecting there to be something that happens as a result of that, and that's going to be for better or for worse. If I have an unpaid student, that may put less pressure on me to find something for them to do that's going to result in meaningful work. On the flip side, if I'm not paying for them, maybe I'm focused only on what their learning is. So I think it's not an either-or situation, but something that should be considered as employers or organizations are taking students on. And that kind of leads into this DEI perspectives from a supervisor perspective, because we do need to think about the barriers that might exist for certain groups in unpaid. That is well documented in the literature. Some students are not going to be able to participate in internships if they're unpaid. But I want to talk here also about the selection process for how students get matched with organizations, because I think if we Certainly there's lots of research that suggests there's different ways bias may be incorporated into that process. There's responsibilities that those of us who are in academic circles can help educate some of our employer organizations on the latest research in this field. I also think that there needs to be an alignment between what the responsibilities of the role that the student's asking to be done and how the selection process works. So to give a concrete example, interviews, the classic traditional interviews, privilege extroverts and people who are good at boasting about themselves. And that probably isn't a requirement for most of the jobs. Those aren't the skills that would be at the top of the list for most of the jobs our interns are being asked to do. So looking for where that alignment is a really good and important way for us to think about DEI perspectives. The other piece that I wanted to flag here, there's lots of organizations that are looking for students from diverse backgrounds to join their teams. And there's a real cautionary tale that's in the research around promises made during the recruitment process and what the student ends up experiencing in the workplace. And the research suggests that particularly from students from equity-deserving groups, if they feel that lots is talked about in terms of policy or practice within an organization, and they show up in the job, and that's not the team that they experience. They just experience discrimination, whether that's active or passive. Then it's like a broken promise. So it's worse than it not having been mentioned at all in the recruitment phase. So it's really important for there to be alignment between what the student's being told during recruitment and what the actual reality of the organization is. And to CJ's point about academic mentors, so in the case of students who have disabilities and require accommodations, our academic institutions have a lot of expertise with respect to how to help make accommodations, and so I think we should be offering that service to organizations so that they can learn how to best support students and not be afraid of what accommodations might look like and how to make that possible for the students. And so to wrap up, I'll just go over a few best practices. The first one may seem obvious, senior leadership support, and when I say that, I mean within the organizations that the students are being taken into. For an understanding of will. So senior leadership support is often important for any kind of successful initiative. I'm going to tell you a story. I was at a keynote in Australia, and there was a panelist who was a CEO at a company who had a passion for work-integrated learning students. And what he told the audience was, if I have $100,000, I could hire a consulting company to give me a report on all the things that I could do to improve my company. Or I could hire 10, and he called them beacons of brilliance, 10 will students and place them in 10 different places in my organization. And by the time they're done, they'll have a list for me of the things that could be done to improve. Now, that was a cool story to hear, but the takeaway for me was, how do all the individual supervisors of will students in that gentleman's organization feel? Because he expects these to be beacons of brilliance. And so that puts a pressure on the supervisors to not be assigning tasks that are meaningless or not important. He sees them as important. And I think that when I think of the impact of that across an organization, it's pretty impressive. Lots of research around onboarding and socialization, lots of mirroring between what would happen for a regular full-time employee versus a student, but setting them off on the right foot, it makes a huge difference to the success of their term and their experience in the organization, which in turn is a benefit to the supervisors. The other practice that is often, wise practice, is often done is assigning a mentor as separate from a supervisor. This may be a senior student who's coming back to the organization. It may be a recent grad, someone who the student is more likely to feel comfortable going and asking questions to, and it alleviates some of the pressure off the day-to-day supervisor. And lastly, we expect reflection and revision as part of our practice, our students' practice, so why not our organization and supervisors? And the best way I've seen of doing this is engaging your current student, creating a climate that they feel comfortable, giving feedback on what worked really well and what they would change for the next student, even involving them in the selection of the next student, or creating manuals or other ways in which you can take what they learned and apply it to moving forward. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gianna.
So we began with our very first reflection question, and now here is our last reflection question. So discussing with everybody at your tables, we kind of want to hear about how this research can inform will practices at your institution. So we will give you a couple of minutes to kind of discuss the ways in which each of the three stakeholders can play an active role and where you come from. So I'll give you guys a few minutes. Okay, if anybody would like to share from their table a little bit of what they had discussed, I think that would be a great opportunity to do at this moment. Would anybody like to begin? Okay, so if we would like to share a little bit from each of our tables on the ways in which we can inform our will practices at our own institutions, would anybody like to start? Nobody. How about somebody from one of our research seminar groups? Anne?
We were just discussing the role that higher education institutions can play in providing additional support to the host organization. So really helping them think through how to bring interns and other students into the organization in a more thoughtful and sort of structured fashion. And that is something that we as higher education institutions should assume is part of our responsibility as well.
Very great. Would anybody else like to add something else as well? Yes, go ahead, Leah.
I would say since we started some of this, we have found more intentional ways to involve students in our program as the institution also, or as both the education institution, but also as the place where they work experience. So finding ways to do that internally.
Okay, very great. Would anybody else like to add anything else before we go into a Q&A session? No? Okay, there you go. Thank you very much.
And I think to Leah's point, a little bit of time in the will world goes a long way. And like I said, I'm telling on myself from 10 years ago of things I did, and my syllabus is, and all that. And really just a little bit of time does a lot. And a lot of time does a lot too. But if you're thinking about starting to get involved with this, and you're sort of not sure where to start or how much time it's going to take, really it makes a big difference just to dive in just a little. Okay, so what questions do you have that you would like to talk about amongst the whole group? Because we would be happy to answer any specific questions if you kind of want to chit-chat. We'll be up here. Is there anything that you'd like to ask or discuss or kind of think about while we're all paying attention to the same thing?
And I've got a mic that I'm going to run around, so please feel free to raise your hand. I'll bring it right to you.
And if you're wondering to yourself, if I don't ask questions, do I get dinner sooner? The answer is yes. So take that for what you will. We'll be here and you'll have food. So I'm just, full disclosure.
You still can ask a question, though.
You're welcome to. I just want you to know the table stakes. Yeah.
So our cue is going to be one last question. I think Peter might have that one last question.
I hate to do this for two reasons. One, it's stalling dinner, but two, I'm putting two people on the spot. But I'm really curious about these amazing students. And I wonder if each of you could say, if you had a magic wand and you could change how will works for students, what would you do? And you can borrow my mic if you want. Or you can go up there, either way. But what would you do to change, really make will more powerful, more meaningful, more accessible, however you frame it for students?
What a killer question. I'm stalling so that they have time to think of an answer. That was truly, really, that's a really great question. Thank you, Peter.
I think the one thing that I would immediately think of is kind of making it more accessible, because I have a lot of friends at many different institutions that I'm friends with from high school who I've spoken with, and they don't really have the same resources that we have here at Elon. So I think kind of creating almost something that would be not just exclusive to some institutions that really center on engaged learning, but kind of bringing that to institutions across the world, I feel like would be something that would be really beneficial, because I've had the opportunity to do multiple internships at my time at Elon. I've studied abroad, I've done research, and this place has really given me those opportunities to facilitate those kinds of engaged learning experiences. So I think just kind of having even just more education on what WIL is, I think will even just benefit students in and of themselves, because there's not really a great understanding of that. It's institutions across the United States. So I really think that will kind of be the best way to benefit students, is to kind of do a greater education on the ways in which it can benefit the students at the individual institutions.
Okay, I don't mean to piggyback off of what Gianna just said, but I think, when I first started this, I really didn't know what WIL was. Like, I didn't know what work integrated learning was. So I think I've had that exposure, so now I really do know. But I think, to Gianna's point, like, making sure that students are educated on this and having them realize like how this might benefit them in the long term, I think that would be a great idea, because again, like, I didn't know what it was. So, and now I do, and I know how important it is and how beneficial this is for students. And so, yeah, I would agree with what Gianna said. Yeah.
And I would even say changing a little bit of the language regarding on how these kinds of experiences are referred to. So I was a part of the School of Communications here at Elon, and it was a requirement for us to graduate to conduct an internship before we graduated. It really isn't discussed that much in our classes. It's more of, some people see it as something on their degree audit, as something they have to complete. And so a lot of times students aren't finding quality WIL experiences, they're doing something to fulfill a requirement. So I think it even goes into like having your professors really kind of emphasize finding those quality experiences so that they can take the things that are at their institutions and being taught and really apply to themselves. So I really think just changing the language and how it would be something beneficial for them, that it would be a really great change in our curriculum. So yes. Yes, Deborah.
I think what that's just said is what sums this up. Students as partners and their engagement and their ability to see the things that we don't see. And I think there is a lesson here for academic staff, faculty, whatever term you use, about being a little bit more humble, and we don't know everything because our students give us the answers. And we've been really fortunate that we've had some fantastic experiences, both from these two wonderful students here in our processes, but also through our research, that we've had that engagement throughout. And that has to be front and centre in any work that we do.
Just to add to what they both said, and Gianna, you really led into this. Thank you. That was lovely. That as a faculty mentor, I'm really thinking about, like, for me, an internship is not a pathway to a job. Is it also a pathway to a job? Yes, 100%. I can tell Dad confidently at the admissions event that your child is going to get a job because they've had an internship. And there's so much more to it than that. And I think we don't often talk about that. I think a lot of times it's just like, yes, internship, pre-job. And there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more growth and a lot more personal development. So I think it's important. Awesome. Other questions or comments?
We're actually going to wrap up.
We're going to wrap it up.
But
Food
please
time.
join me in thanking this wonderful team. There might also be some proud parents in the room, and I'm tempted to ask if Dad asked the question about job security. But
Can I answer?
So thank you very much to our team. What a great kickoff for the rest of the conference. Just to give you a quick preview of what's next, dinner. We're going to enjoy it. There are time cues on the schedule, but really it's just we're going to enjoy dinner. And then when we're ready, we're going to move on to a poster session and dessert reception. And that's going to be in a different building. We'll have a couple people who will walk and guide the way. It's not far from here, but you can see we're going from that blue square to the purple square. And there's the pathway. And again, we'll guide the way. But for now, our awesome catering colleagues are poised to bring out our salads. Please, again, if you want a vegetarian option, please make sure that you've got your tent out, and if you need one, just let me know. But thanks for the great start, and let's enjoy dinner. Thank you all.